The night was quiet along Interstate 84, with only the faint hum of passing trucks breaking the silence. Marcus Hale, a tall, dignified black man in his late 40s, pulled his Lexus into a rest stop to stretch his legs and grab some coffee. He had just finished a long day, preparing briefs for an upcoming trial, and needed a moment to clear his head before driving the final hour home. Inside the restroom, Marcus exchanged polite nods with a trucker and washed his hands. Nothing unusual, but as he stepped back outside, 2 patrol cars suddenly pulled in, headlights cutting across the lot. Their tires screeched, echoing like an alarm in the still night. 2 officers jumped out, their hands already resting on their holsters. "You there! Hands where we can see them!" one barked. Marcus froze, stunned by the aggression. "Excuse me, I'm just—" "Don't move," the second officer shouted, rushing forward. Before Marcus could explain, he felt cold metal slam against his wrists as they cuffed him roughly. His heart pounded, not out of guilt but disbelief. He wasn't speeding, hadn't broken any laws, he'd only stopped for coffee. "On what grounds are you arresting me?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but edged with controlled anger. "Suspicious activity," one officer sneered. "You fit the description." Marcus exhaled slowly. He had heard those words too many times in his life. Still, he bit back the urge to argue, knowing the situation could escalate dangerously. As they shoved him toward the squad car, Marcus studied their faces carefully, memorizing every detail. Little did these officers know the man they were humiliating tonight was not just another traveler. Tomorrow, their entire world would shift. The squad car smelled faintly of sweat and stale fast food wrappers. Marcus sat in the back seat, his wrists pinched by the cuffs, the cool metal pressing against his skin. Outside the tinted glass, the interstate blurred by, illuminated by flashing red and blue lights that drew unnecessary attention to a man who had committed no crime. The officer driving glanced at him in the mirror. "What's your name?" he demanded, his tone sharp, almost mocking. "Marcus Hale," he replied evenly. The other officer in the passenger seat chuckled. "Fancy car for a Hale. You a dealer?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He had learned that silence sometimes spoke louder than words, but the accusation stung. He wanted to remind them that not every successful black man was a criminal, that he had earned everything through discipline, education, and years of service. Still, he kept his composure. "Occupation?" the driver asked. "I'm an attorney," Marcus answered calmly. The officers exchanged skeptical glances, then broke into laughter. "Sure you are," the passenger scoffed. "Next you'll tell us you're a senator." Marcus leaned back against the seat, his jaw tightening. He had argued in courtrooms across the state, handled civil rights cases, defended the powerless, and even advised legislators. Yet tonight, none of that mattered. In these men's eyes, he was reduced to a stereotype. They pulled into the county station, dragging Marcus out as though parading a trophy. Inside, he was booked, fingerprinted, and thrown into a holding cell without explanation. Hours ticked by. Marcus sat on the bench, his suit wrinkled, his dignity tested but unbroken. He thought of the irony. Tomorrow he was scheduled to preside over a disciplinary hearing. The irony struck him like thunder. He recognized the names on the docket. It was them. The cell was cold, lit by a single buzzing fluorescent bulb that flickered now and then. Marcus sat on the hard bench, his back against the wall, hands clasped loosely in front of him. His wrists bore faint red marks where the cuffs had dug in earlier. Around him, the silence of the station was broken only by distant voices and the metallic slam of doors. It wasn't his first encounter with prejudice, but this one cut deeper. Marcus wasn't just any man off the street. He had spent decades working to prove that justice could be blind, that fairness could prevail. Yet tonight, he was reminded that to some, his skin color spoke louder than his achievements. He replayed the moment at the rest stop, how quickly suspicion had replaced common sense, how arrogance had silenced reason. It wasn't about justice, it was about power. Closing his eyes, Marcus steadied his breathing. Years of courtroom discipline had taught him patience, but tonight, patience meant something different. He wasn't just waiting for release, he was waiting for the right moment. The irony of tomorrow's hearing lingered in his mind like an unspoken promise. At dawn, an officer slid a tray of watery eggs and burnt toast through the slot. Marcus ignored it, choosing instead to sip water from the paper cup. Hours later, a superior arrived, paperwork in hand. After a few clipped exchanges and some hurried signatures, Marcus was released. No apology, no acknowledgement, Just a cold dismissal, as though the night had been a minor inconvenience. Marcus straightened his suit jacket, gathered what remained of his dignity, and walked out of the station with quiet resolve. Tomorrow wasn't just another day in court. Tomorrow was Justice's turn to speak. Morning light spilled through the grand windows of the county courthouse, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Marcus entered through the side judge's entrance, his briefcase in hand, his posture steady. His suit was freshly pressed, his tie neatly knotted, and his expression unreadable. To anyone watching, he looked like a man arriving for an ordinary day, but Marcus knew today would be anything but ordinary. He made his way through the quiet corridors, nodding to clerks and assistants who greeted him respectfully. None could guess the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. In courtroom 3B, the bailiff prepared the docket. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. Marcus took his seat at the bench, adjusting his glasses as he glanced down at the list before him. His eyes froze on two names, Officer Brian Keller and Officer Daniel Hodge, the same men who had shoved him into a squad car less than 12 hours ago. He inhaled slowly, steadying his heartbeat. This was the moment he had anticipated in that cell. The system had placed him in a unique position, one where restraint and integrity mattered more than personal vengeance. At 10 sharp, the doors opened. The officers strode in, their uniforms crisp, their expressions cocky. Clearly, they expected a lenient slap on the wrist for their misconduct, the kind of privilege often afforded to men like them. But then their eyes lifted. Recognition struck like lightning. Their smirks faltered, their steps slowed. There he was, Marcus Hale, seated above them in the judge's chair. The silence in the courtroom was palpable, thick with tension. The officers exchanged panicked glances, realizing the tables had turned in a way neither training nor arrogance had prepared them for. The bailiff's voice echoed, "All rise." Everyone stood as Marcus entered the courtroom in full judicial robes, his presence commanding. He took his seat at the bench with deliberate calm, his gavel resting gently in his hand. The atmosphere shifted instantly, an unspoken recognition that authority now belonged to him. The two officers, Keller and Hodge, looked stunned. Their eyes darted nervously around the room, searching for some kind of escape. Keller whispered, "That's the guy from last night." Hodge's jaw tightened. This has to be a joke." But it was no joke. Marcus adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, his voice steady and formal. "This court is now in session for disciplinary hearings regarding officers Brian Keller and Daniel Hodge, charged with abuse of authority, unlawful detainment, and racial misconduct." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The irony of fate had hit them harder than any reprimand could. Less than a day ago, they had laughed at Marcus, mocking his claim of being an attorney. Now, the truth was inescapable. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was their judge. The prosecutor rose, laying out the allegations. These officers engaged in racial profiling, excessive force, and fabricated charges, all while failing to uphold their oath to protect and serve. As evidence began to flow, body cam footage, witness statements, the officers' arrogance eroded, replaced by sweat and restless movements. Every detail confirmed Marcus's lived experience from the night before. But Marcus didn't gloat. His expression remained neutral, though his eyes burned with an inner fire. He knew this moment wasn't about revenge. It was about showing that justice could rise above hatred, even when hatred tried to crush it. And justice, today, was staring them down. The defense attorney, a middle-aged man with slicked-back hair and a forced air of confidence, rose to his feet. "Your Honor, these officers were simply doing their duty. The situation at the rest stop was suspicious. My clients acted in good faith, following protocol." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "Suspicious, counsel? Kindly define what you mean by suspicious." The lawyer hesitated. "Well, the vehicle, the late hour, the defendant's behavior," Marcus interjected smoothly. "The defendant? Am I to understand you are referring to me?" A heavy silence fell across the room. The defense attorney swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor, I mean, the individual they detained." The gallery shifted uneasily, whispers breaking out. The irony was now painfully clear. The so-called suspicious individual was the very man presiding over this case. Marcus let the silence hang for a moment before continuing, his voice calm but firm. "Last night, I was that individual. I was handcuffed without cause, ridiculed, and accused of being a criminal while doing nothing more than stopping for coffee. Are you suggesting that my skin color constituted suspicion? The attorney stammered, his composure unraveling. No, Your Honor, of course not. Marcus's gaze cut sharp as steel. Then perhaps you should reconsider your argument, because protocol does not permit humiliation, law does not excuse prejudice, and duty does not grant immunity from accountability. The defense sat down quickly, sweat beading at his temples. The officers avoided Marcus's eyes, staring instead at the table in front of them. The courtroom was no longer just a hall of justice, it had become a mirror. And in that mirror, the officers were being forced to confront the ugliness of their own reflection. The prosecutor called the first witness, a trucker who had been at the rest stop that night. A burly man with weathered hands, he stepped forward nervously, hat clutched in his grip. "Sir," the prosecutor began, "can you tell the court what you saw?" The trucker nodded. "I was getting coffee when I saw Mr. Hale. Didn't seem suspicious to me, just a man stretching his legs. Then those two officers came in, guns practically out, shouting like he'd robbed a bank. I remember thinking it was overkill." The gallery murmured in agreement. The prosecutor pressed further. "Did Mr. Hale resist in any way?" "No, ma'am. He was calm, kept asking what he'd done wrong, but they weren't listening. Just slammed cuffs on him like he was dangerous. Wasn't right." Marcus gave a small nod, acknowledging the trucker's courage in testifying. Next came the booking officer, who reluctantly admitted on the stand. "Yeah, there wasn't much paperwork to support the arrest. It was just logged as suspicious activity. No evidence, nothing concrete." The prosecutor leaned in. "So he was held overnight without cause?" The officer shifted uncomfortably. "Yes." Gasps rippled again. Marcus listened intently, his face composed but his heart heavy. Each testimony didn't just recount his own humiliation, it revealed a larger truth, that the system had cracks that swallowed innocent men whole if they weren't strong enough to climb back out. When the prosecutor finished, Marcus spoke with quiet authority. "This court values truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Every voice here matters, especially when injustice is at stake." The officers looked smaller now, their earlier arrogance stripped away, but Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The deeper truths were yet to surface. When it was their turn, the defense called Officer Keller to the stand. He walked stiffly, shoulders squared, jaw clenched. His voice was steady at first, but the tension in the room was undeniable. "I observed Mr. Hale loitering near vehicles at the rest stop," Keller began. "It appeared suspicious. We feared potential theft or drug activity." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Officer Keller, did you see me commit any crime?" "No, Your Honor. Did I threaten you? Raise my voice? Resist arrest in any way?" Keller hesitated. "No, sir. But," Marcus cut in gently, "so your justification was not based on actions, but assumptions?" The officer shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, but protocol allows us to—" Marcus's tone sharpened. "Protocol does not give license to profile citizens based on prejudice. You swore an oath to uphold the law without bias. Did you uphold that oath last night?" Keller faltered, sweat forming at his temples. "I believed I did." The silence was damning. Next, Officer Hodge took the stand. He tried to steady himself, speaking louder, almost defensive. "We had reason to believe he matched a description of a suspect." Marcus's brow arched. "And what description was that?" Hodge fumbled with his words. African-American male, mid-40s, driving a dark car." The gallery erupted in gasps. Marcus's voice grew firm. "By that definition, half the men in this county could be detained. Do you realize how dangerous that rationale is?" Hodge's eyes dropped. His earlier bravado evaporated under the weight of the truth. Marcus tapped his gavel once, restoring silence. "This court seeks facts, not excuses. What I see here is not law enforcement. What I see is abuse dressed as authority." The officer's case was unraveling fast. By midday, the courtroom felt like a battlefield. Every statement, every piece of evidence, tilted the scales further against the officers. The gallery leaned forward in tense anticipation, whispers spreading like wildfire as the narrative of injustice unfolded in plain sight. The prosecutor presented the body camera footage next. The screen flickered to life, displaying the harsh glare of headlights at the rest stop. The officers' voices rang out, sharp, aggressive, dripping with contempt. "Hands where we can see them. Don't move. You fit the description." There it was. The arrogance, the hostility, the baseless accusation, all preserved in cold, undeniable clarity. The gallery reacted audibly, gasps and murmurs filling the room. Even the defense attorney's face paled as the footage rolled on, showing Marcus's calm, measured responses. His composure under pressure contrasted sharply with the officer's belligerence. When the video ended, silence reigned. Marcus looked directly at the defendants. "The truth is not hidden. It is here, before us all. Do you deny what we have just seen?" Neither officer spoke. Keller shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Hodge kept his eyes fixed on the floor. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Your Honor, this is not an isolated incident. Records show multiple complaints filed against these officers in the past, cases quietly dismissed or buried. Tonight's actions are part of a disturbing pattern." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. The gallery buzzed with outrage, reporters scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Marcus exhaled, steadying himself. He had spent his career believing in justice, but now he stood face to face with the rot eating away at its core. And yet, this moment wasn't about him. It was about accountability, real, lasting accountability, and the tide was turning. The defense attorney rose again, desperation bleeding into his voice. "Your Honor, while the footage may look unfavorable, we must remember the dangers officers face daily. Split-second decisions." Marcus raised a hand, silencing him. His tone was cool but edged with steel. "A split-second decision is drawing your weapon when threatened. What I witnessed last night was not instinct, it was presumption. A presumption rooted in race." The words hung heavy. Even the jurors, though silent, shifted in their seats, the gravity of Marcus's statement rippling across the room. Officer Keller suddenly stood. "With respect, Your Honor, you don't understand what it's like out there. We have to stay alert. We see danger before it happens." Marcus's gaze locked on him. "I understand perfectly, Officer Keller. What you call staying alert, I call stripping a man of his dignity. Tell me, was I a danger when I bought coffee? Was I a danger when I asked why I was being detained?" Keller opened his mouth, but no words came. Hodge slammed his fist against the table. "This isn't fair. You're biased. You're making this personal." The gallery erupted with murmurs. Marcus's voice cut through the noise. "Biased? Last night, I was silent while you ridiculed me. I didn't resist, even as you shoved me into a squad car. If I wanted revenge, I wouldn't be sitting here holding you to account with facts. This is not personal. This is justice." The room stilled. Hodge's anger collapsed into shame, his bravado shattered. Marcus tapped the gavel once. "This court is not swayed by arrogance or excuses. Only truth. Only law. And both weigh heavily against you." The officers, once defiant, now looked like men realizing their armor had cracked. News of the case spread beyond the courthouse walls. Reporters packed into the gallery, cameras flashing, pens racing across notepads. Outside, crowds gathered on the courthouse steps, chanting for justice, their voices carrying through the city like a rising tide. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Every word spoken, every testimony given, became fuel for the headlines. The trial was no longer just about two officers. It had become a symbol of something larger. Marcus sat tall at the bench, his expression steady, though the weight of the moment pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had endured humiliation at the rest stop, but now he bore the responsibility of making sure justice wasn't just done, it was seen being done. The prosecutor continued, revealing complaint after complaint that had been buried in the past. Each time these officers walked away without consequence. Citizens silenced, reports ignored. But today the truth has caught up. The gallery erupted in applause before the bailiff restored order. Keller and Hodge looked cornered, like animals trapped under the blinding glare of accountability. They whispered furiously to their attorney, but nothing they said could undo the evidence mounting against them. Marcus spoke clearly, his voice resonant across the room. "This court does not exist in the shadows. The people are watching. They deserve transparency, not excuses. They deserve justice, not delay." Reporters scribbled the line down instantly, knowing it would dominate the evening broadcasts. The officers' smirks were gone, their confidence eroded. For the first time, they seemed to realize this wasn't just about a disciplinary hearing. It was about their careers, their reputations, and the stain they had left on the badge they wore. And the world was watching every second. The hearing reached its final stage. Both sides had argued, evidence had been laid bare, and testimonies had stripped away any illusions. Now all eyes turned to Marcus. The room was tense, silent except for the creak of wooden benches as spectators leaned forward. Even the air felt heavy, thick with expectation. Keller sat rigid, his fists clenched tightly on the table. Hodge looked pale, sweat glistening on his brow. Marcus spoke slowly, each word deliberate. Law enforcement carries immense power. With power comes responsibility, and with responsibility comes accountability. Last night, you abused that power. Not only against me, but against the very principles you swore to protect. He paused, letting the words sink in. The gallery hung on every syllable. I could let my anger guide me. I could let personal offense dictate my ruling. But justice does not bow to personal vendetta. It bows to truth. The prosecutor nodded solemnly, while the defense attorney sat motionless, beaten by the mountain of evidence. Marcus continued. The question before this court is not whether mistakes were made. They were. The question is whether this institution has the courage to confront those mistakes and correct them. His gavel hovered above the desk. These hearings are not about vengeance. They are about restoring faith in a system that must belong to all citizens equally, black, white, rich, poor. No badge shields you from accountability. No uniform places you above the law. The gallery erupted in quiet applause before being hushed. Marcus looked at the two men before him, no longer symbols of authority, but men stripped bare by truth. They sat at a crossroads, their futures hanging by a thread, and Marcus was holding the scissors. Marcus lifted the gavel, the weight of both wood and justice heavy in his hand. The courtroom leaned forward collectively, breaths held, waiting for the sound that would seal fate. He began, voice calm yet thunderous in its certainty. After careful consideration of the evidence, testimonies, and the undeniable truth revealed before this court, I find Officers Keller and Hodge guilty of misconduct, abuse of authority, and unlawful detainment. The gavel struck, crack, echoing, like thunder through the chamber. Gasps, then applause erupted from the gallery. Reporters scrambled, cameras flashing, pens racing. Outside, cheers rose as the verdict spread. Marcus wasn't finished. He leaned forward, eyes locked on the officers. This ruling does not erase the humiliation I endured, nor the fear instilled in countless others who faced your abuse. But it does send a message. The law is not your weapon. It is your duty. And when you betray it, you answer for it. Keller's shoulders slumped, his once defiant posture collapsing. Hodge buried his face in his hands, the reality crashing over him. The defense attorney sat frozen, defeated. Marcus's voice softened, though it carried no pity. This court recommends immediate suspension, internal review, and referral for criminal charges. Let this serve as a reminder: justice will not be mocked, not by prejudice, not by arrogance, not by the shield of a badge. The gallery rose to its feet, a wave of applause filling the room. Some clapped, others wept, but all knew they had witnessed something larger than one case. Marcus tapped the gavel again. Court adjourned. The officers were led away, their futures uncertain, but for Marcus, the moment was more than a verdict. It was vindication. Justice had spoken, and its voice had thundered. The courthouse steps overflowed with people as Marcus emerged, the afternoon sun blazing overhead. Reporters rushed forward, microphones extended, their questions tumbling over one another. Judge Hale, how does it feel to preside over the case of your own arrest? Do you believe justice was truly served today? What message do you want the nation to take from this ruling? Marcus raised his hand, and the crowd hushed. His voice carried with quiet strength. What happened to me was not unique. Many have suffered in silence, stripped of dignity without cause. Today was not just about two officers. It was about accountability. Justice must not wear blinders. Justice must see the people it serves. Applause broke out, rippling across the crowd. Back inside, Keller and Hodge were led down the corridor in handcuffs, the very same cuffs they had once used to humiliate Marcus. The irony was unmistakable, and whispers followed them like shadows. Their world had crumbled, not because Marcus sought revenge, but because the truth had been undeniable. That evening, Marcus sat alone in his chambers, the courthouse now quiet. He removed his robe and placed it carefully on the hanger, his reflection staring back from the window. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel the weight of what had transpired. He thought of the countless others who never got their day in court, who never had the power to speak back to injustice. He whispered softly, almost as a vow, "This fight isn't finished," because Marcus knew justice wasn't a single verdict. It was a flame that needed tending, a light to pierce the darkness of prejudice wherever it hid. And as long as he wore the robe, that flame would never go out.